Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have to implement card components, footer, discount animation and header. Without further ado, let's jump right in and define the new component card. It's going to be a normal class. The reason why I decided to create my own card for two reasons. The first one, for performance, if you do remember, under the home screen, we have the products fragment. We have to wrap this content using a card, and you have to add a shadow or an elevation for this. If you try to do this under the default card in Material Design WPF, gonna experience a huge drop in frame rates. Therefore, I come up with this solution. And the other reason is if you want to use name inside this particular content or this card, it's not gonna be possible. Actually, it's gonna always complain about that you have already defined this particular name under your view or your user control, which is annoying, to be honest. Therefore, instead of using a normal user control, it has to inherit from content control. Let's define a static constructor. And inside the constructor, we have just to set the metadata and to set the style property, default style key property, type of card, framework property metadata. So by defining, first of all, the static constructor card, it's going to run once for this class type, not per instance, all right, which is very important for performance. Now, under override metadata, it's going to override the default style lookup behavior. So WPF knows to look for the control default style, in other words, the control template in theme, generic, and XML, for example. Now, for the dependency properties for this particular class, we need to define the background color, and let's define another property for the border radius. Now, we can consider this as the code behind, but we have to implement the style of this card component, not the design or the example file. Now, under theme, it's going to be like any normal style. We have talked about this particular style earlier in the application when we set up the style of our application. Now, what I would like to do here is I don't want to use the shadow or the elevation. For this purpose, I'm going to simulate basically the shadow. It's going to look a little bit, medievalish, and overlaying some containers with some default background colors. It's going to increase basically the performance of our application, more specifically under the ISM controls. We have to specify here the target and card. What we have to set basically is the template property. I'm going to build the entire project to get rid of this error. Now we have to override the value for the control template regarding the card components. For the control template type, it is the main type here. The template or the content should be represented, as I said before, to overlay. Let's do just 3 rectangles to represent the bottom side of the card, which is the shadow or the elevation. I couldn't find actually another way to do so. The goal here is to make the application smooth by omitting the use of the shadow or the elevation. Now, the first rectangle, it's going to have a background of this color and a margin, do the same left corner, the same top corner, and the same right corner, but we're going to change a little bit the bottom corner. Each layer has to go down a little bit by 1 pixel. And for the border radius, for X position and Y position, top left, all right? This property, it's under the template parent. With the same manner, we have to define the Y radius underneath by 1 pixel. We're going to define the same rectangle, but in a different color. The second one should be a little bit down by 3 pixels and a little bit darker. I think you get where I'm going with this. And the last one, it's going to be, let's say, 25 and a little bit darker than this particular color. Underneath, we have to put our content or whatever we're going to do here in the card. It's going to be within a border. Now for the margin, which is very important, we have to set it 0, and it has to be 25 for the background from the dependency property. Likewise for the corner radius. And let's cache it using cache mode, bitmap cache, snaps to device pixel to true, and clips bound to true, which is very important. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not going to look as expected. And we have to open the tag in order to put inside the content presenter. Now for the content, it's going to be from the template binding and content. Next, we have to set the content template to content template. And for the horizontal alignment, let's do here stretch and vertical alignment stretch. And that's pretty much it for the style of the card. Now, by doing this, it's going to be assigned automatically every time we are using the card component. Now, let's go ahead and define a preview for this. Now, I would like to add here the column definition to show 2 cards in a row. Now, let's use the card component. We don't want to use the material design WPF. I don't know if you can see it, but you can already see the illusion of the shadow. It's not going to look perfect, but it's going to serve purpose. Now I'm going to do, for example, the card background to surface, border radius to 6, 400 as a width, minimum height 100, and center it horizontally and add some margin. Right, you can see the first card. Let's put something inside, for example, a text. I'm going to copy the same thing and add the other one. It has to be in the second row. This is a big card, if you will, and this is a small one. Basically, we don't have to run the preview because we have the result here in the card preview, and it looks fine to me. I guess by using this, the performance is not going to be affected at all, to be honest, because this is a lightweight card where I have to make the application to look good even in a wacky computer. All right, that's pretty much it for this particular component. Now let's define the footer. We don't need any dependency properties here because it is very simple. I will wrap everything within a border instead. Let's set first of all the background from static resource and the primary. Now what we have to do inside, simply a text block showing the copyright. For the text, use the string resource. However, in the string resource, we have a placeholder for the application name. And I don't want to hard code this application name. Therefore, I'm going to create a converter for this, yet to be implemented. I'm going to call it string resource converter. First of all, we have to get the string from the parameter, which is going to be the format that we are looking for as a string. If not able to convert it to string, it has to be empty string. All right. Next, we have to do string on format to replace the placeholder with the argument. For the first argument, we have to pass the culture and format and value. Let's import the converter and let's use the converter. Basically, this is the first time, I guess, that we have used a converter with a parameter. And let's specify, first of all, the source, where to get the string or the content, which is basically from string resource. Let's import string resource, application name, which is the value that should be assigned in the placeholder. Now we have to use the converter, and for the converter parameter, and again from string resource, text copyright. Now I've just checked the string resource. It is internal. We have to see the code behind, or the generated code. It is internal, it should be public. How to do so? Let's click on string resource. And here it shouldn't be internal, it should be public. And we have to save the file to be auto-generated with public modifier. Now it should be public. All right, here we go. And it should be recognized in all modules. Now let's come back to the footer and build the entire project. All right, here we go. We have 2 more components to go. The third component, which is for animation. Let's call it discount animation. It's going to be a normal wrapper around .lutey animation. Let's import Lutey from Lutey Sharp. We have to set the autoplay as we have done in other apps to true and repeat count to -1. And the resource path, it should be discount offer from X static animation resource. And let's choose discount offers. We won't be previewing anything here. Let's create the last components before wrapping up the video, which is the header. Under components, create a new user control. Let's call it header. It consists actually of a couple of placeholders. We have to set here the toolbar as a placeholder for a component, another component for the search input. And whenever we click on the logo, we have to trigger or to call a function. Therefore, we're going to create it as a public event of type mouse button event handler, nullable, and logo click. All right, we're going to come back to this particular implementation. The first element that we have to do here is the background of the header, which is very important. In order to do the background, we're going to use grid. It should be the first element on the stack. SVG image for the horizontal alignment should be stretch. All right, to occupy the maximum width and height. The index, it should be 0. And for the size type, content to size stretch. And let's define here the source from static. Let's import images, background, blob background. All right, here we go. We have the image as a background for the whole container. Let's represent this layer with grid. Here the z index to 1. And I would like to represent those elements under horizontal sequence. Let's use row instead of stack panel. Now we have 2 rows for the logo and the search bar and the user menu. This is the first row, and the second row consists of the animated text. All right. Now for the first row should be represented using columns. We have 3 columns actually, and it should be at the row 0, which is the first row. The first element consists of the logo. I'm gonna wrap it within a border. For the width, let's do, for example, 80, and the height 60. For the horizontal alignment, has to be left, and for the vertical alignment center. For the background, transparent, just for this particular border, which is the container. All right, now we have to do, whenever we click on this particular one, logo click. And speaking of which, what you have to do here, we're just gonna trigger this event logo. If it's null, invoke, and you have to pass this header and event. And that's all for the code behind. We're not gonna come back here anymore. Let's close it from the SVG file, images resource, full logo. All right, now we should have the logo here. Now the second element, which is a placeholder for the search input, we're gonna use, you guessed it, content control, and we have to set the colon to 1. And the remaining space is gonna be for the toolbar. It has to have the colon number 2, which is the third element. Now we have to replicate basically what we have under Vue3 application. We are no longer dealing with small screens. We have to handle large screen, extra large screen, and medium screen and small screen. For this purpose, we're gonna use the media query that we have implemented earlier to define the rest. Now we are done with the top section of our header. We have to place the type in text. I'm gonna mark it as a to-do. Now let's define the type in text under component, create a new user control. Let's call it type in text block. I would like to start with the code behind to define the needed dependencies. I will try to define it as reusable as possible. The first dependency property that I would like to have here is the text itself to be shown, and the font size and the foreground. Now we have to define the properties, font family, pretty much almost the same properties as a text block. Let's define the text wrapping, font family, and as we have done in the Vue3 application, as well as Swift application and Kotlin application, we have to define the typing speed. Next dependency property, which is for the style and the alignment and the line height for this particular typing text block. You can add more dependencies, but I would like to keep it this way. Since it's going to be the same thing as we have done in the other apps, we have to set here some timeout in order to change the variable text. Therefore, I'm going to create here a private member, read only, of type dispatcher timer, and the variable text to be displayed. Timer and tick, we have to access the text and change the text accordingly. Before moving forward, let's come back to the design, type in text block. Inside grid, I'm going to add here a text block, name for the code behind. Now for the font family and font size, foreground, line height, all the dependency properties that we have done earlier, they're going to be served from the code behind. That's all. Now we have to come back to the code behind, as simple as this for the presentation of this type in text block. First of all, we have to check that the current index of the text being typed is less than the full length of the text. Therefore, I'm going to add here a tracker, if you will, that's going to track the index or the character index 0. Now, if the character index, basically we haven't reached the full text length yet, we need to assign the value, all right? Otherwise, we have to stop the timer because the timer won't go forever. In this particular section, we're gonna use the part text box and text, and we have to set basically the full text character index, and we have to move to the next index, all right? Now we have to observe the changes of the text under this dependency property. We're gonna do on text changed, because who's gonna change the text for us? It's the timer. I'm gonna add it here. First things first, we need to check if this dependency object is of type in text block, and the new value, we're gonna do control. We'll start typing the text by animation. All right, let's call this function start typing text, or just start typing. And we have to pass as an argument the text or the new text. Now let's create this function. First things first, we have to stop the timer initially. And you have to set the character index to 0. And for the full text, it should be new text. And let's initialize the part text box to empty. And we have to set the timer interval to time span from milliseconds, passing as an argument the typing speed. And we will start the timer. By doing this, it's not enough. We need to handle another event, which is whenever the typing speed changed, we have to assign the interval for the timer from the typing speed. Therefore, under this dependency property, let's say, for example, on typing speed changed, create this function. If this control or this dependency object is of type typing text, and we don't need actually here to access the new string. In this case, we have to set from control, more specifically the timer, a new interval, time span. I'm gonna copy this from typing speed. Instead of this, it couldn't be set like this. It has to be done using control and typing speed. And that's all for the implementation of typing speed text block. Now we can use this particular typing text block inside the header. It's gonna be within a grid. Now we have to implement again the responsiveness of our header by using the media query that we have implemented earlier in the app. It is the second row occupying the remaining content. All right, now for the horizontal alignment, it has to be left. I'm gonna just force this value, and this particular section that's gonna show this typing speed, it's gonna be variable according to the screen width, as we have done actually in the Vuetify application. Why we do this? Because we're going to put here the typing speed, and next here, it should be the other SVG file that we haven't used actually in the SwiftUI or the Kotlin version. We have used this particular SVG file. We're gonna do that here, but we have to do it responsively. Therefore, we have to use here under this grid, the responsive attached property. We're gonna set this particular width to occupy 70% if we are under extra large screen. And for the large screen, 70% also. For the medium screen, 100%, and small screen, 100%. Now we have to specify the target property, static, because it's not hard-coded, under responsive, visual property, and width. Now this container grid is responsive. Now we can use the typing text that we have implemented earlier. For the padding, let's do, for example, 12, alignment left, of course, and font family. Let's do dynamic resource, and the font, we have to import font. For the font size should be, let's do 27. Now for the foreground should be foreground primary. For the line height, let's do, for example, 60. And for the text, let's use here strings. I'm gonna import strings, x static. And let's do here the header text. Now underneath this grid, we have to put the Lutey animation. All right, we should override here the typing speed and to set the text wrapping. And for the typing speed, let's say, for example, 35. As I said before, we have to put here the Lutey animation. That's going to be placed at the right corner of our header. Colon, it should be 1, which is the second one. And for the width, let's say, for example, 700 and 700. For the horizontal alignment, all right, it shouldn't be here, actually. It should be underneath the second grid. For the horizontal alignment, right. For the vertical alignment, bottom. Now it should be responsive. Target property here should be visibility. Now it should be visible on extra large screen, and it should be hidden under medium and small screen, as we have done when targeting the mobile version of Pocket Goods under Swift and Kotlin. And you have to set the target property to visibility. Now for the autoplay should be true, repeat count -1, and let's use the resource path background animation. Now it's not going to be visible because I think this screen or this width doesn't fit actually the large screen or extra large screen. It's very small. It's like a mobile screen. I'm going just to translate the X position and Y position a little bit to fit the needed layout. Open the tag, going to target the render transform, translate transform. For the X position, going to be 30, for example, and 60 for the Y position. And that's all for the header section. Now we are safe to build a preview for this. Well, here it should be from milliseconds, not from seconds. Let's come back to the text block or the header file. In the preview, create a new window. Let's call it header preview. I'm going to add a text field for the search input. And here we have to do on logo click All right, we have the search input. We're going to add the suggestions from the view model and the search query from the view model. The last component, which is the toolbar. It's going to be a normal button. I think that's pretty much it for the preview. It looks as expected. Now let's define the code behind. I try to move quick in this particular section because it's not the scope of this tutorial, and the video is getting long already. So we have to pick up the pace. First of all, we have to set the data context. Whenever we click on the logo, just going to show a message box. And whenever we click on the magnify icon, I'm going to show again message box. Now for the function that should be attached on text field when it has the focus, we'll try to animate basically the width of the container or the search input. Original width. Now we have to check if the sender is a framework element. I'm gonna capture the original width once on first focus. Now we have just to set the target animation. If it's focused, let's increase the original width by 150, for example. Otherwise, it's gonna be just the original width, double animation. Target width for the duration, let's just do, for example, 300 milliseconds. Easy and out, all right? Finally, we can animate the element. Let's come back to the main window. I'm gonna add here a button, open header preview. Come back to the code behind, copy this. Here it has to be header preview. Instead of breadcrumb, we have to do header preview. All right, let's see how it's gonna look like. All right. All right, we have the type in text. Now let's, okay, it looks good actually. Let's click on the, you can add here the cursor to change the cursor if you want. Logo clicked. I think that we have some binding issues here for the suggestions. All right. Now, what is very important here is we need to check the responsiveness. It's still been visible. We need to investigate why this responsiveness doesn't hide this particular section. All right, let's check the binding failures. We don't have any binding failure. I'm going to stop the preview. Now let's come back to the media query and to visibility. I think there's some kind of mismatch or some kind of Gaussian issue. Convert it to lowercase, to trim, and to lower. Better, we have to use invariant or to lower invariant. Let's run the preview. I think that we don't have a problem with the width. It's responsive, but the visibility is not. All right. As you can see here, it's not visible, which is what we want. And for the width of this particular type in text, it is responsive. Now let's increase the width of this screen. Here we go, we have it as in the Vuetify application. Under medium screen or small screen, it's not going to be shown. In the production, we're going to basically limit the width of this screen in order not to be very small. They can do something like this. I don't know who's going to work with an application with this particular width, but users can do whatever they want. So we have to basically limit the width of this, to set the minimum width actually for this window in production, for the main window. Can't see the suggestions anywhere. Let's try to debug this. Under the main view model or core preview view model, I'm gonna type something like S for sunglasses. You can see here the search query S, search results 5, but we don't have the autocomplete section. I just copied basically the autocomplete from this particular section form. We haven't set the autocomplete. And for the rest, you have to explicitly set the width. Now let's see the preview and let's check if we have the suggestions and the animation. Click on header preview. Now I'm going to click on this to have focus. You can see the animation. Now let's type, for example, S. Here we have sunglasses. Searching now as we have done earlier. You can adjust the position of this SVG, but for the most part, it is good. And that's gonna wrap up our today's video. For the next tutorial, continue building components. We still have the component carousel to build, and I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next tutorial, and happy coding!